We have a panel up next around the theme of reinventing education. Education trends will ride the wave of increased internet capabilities and higher network bandwidth, bringing advanced technology into schools with greater ease. To moderate the panel, I would like to request Rabii Malik, strategy consultant at McKinsey & Company, to join us on stage. With your applause.
Can you guys hear me okay? I'll take that as a yes. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and especially the guests. I want to kick off with just a little bit of context and then hand it over to the distinguished speakers that we have. I think everybody's bringing a very unique perspective, and I think I want everybody in the audience to push what we think of as education, right? Especially if you're in like venture or investments. I think traditionally people look at like India and all they think of is like K-12 and like videos. That's it. But education is way more than that, right? Education is something that we do throughout our lives. Education can be relevant to adults. Education can be through other channels, right? It can be through AR, it can be through VR, it can be through videos, it can be through live learning. And it's definitely more complicated than that. And I'm hoping that our guests will help us dive into some of that nuance, help us understand what some of the challenges are for entrepreneurs in the educational space, and then looking forward, what are some of the opportunities, right? Education has a huge opportunity. We have a huge opportunity to use education to uplift our country and our people. And I'm not going to bore you guys with the demographics and statistics, but we are a country of very young people. I think it's around 30% of our population which is classified as youth, right? And even if 60 is under 30, I think, but like 30% is like 15 to 30. And I think what we need to recognize is that it's through multiple different ventures, multiple different initiatives that we can actually serve all of these different recipients, right? Users, however you want to characterize the people on the receiving end of the education. With that, I want to hand over to some of our guests. Can I just ask you to introduce yourselves? Maybe start with your name, your role, and the organization that you work with, or have founded.
Yep, my name is Haroon. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Taleemabad. Taleemabad basically does K-6 content. We've been here for the last 7 years, and now reach a total of 10 million children through broadcast, TV, radio, and mobile apps.
Amazing.
I'm Navera Waheed. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Edtech. We have been working in K-12, and now we've also added another revenue stream, that is soft skill training for enterprises.
Awesome.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ghazi Taimoor. I'm a chartered accountant turned educator now. I work at the LUMS School of Education. I am the head of professional education, so we look at all types of training programs for educators across Pakistan.
Hi guys, I'm Aiman Bashir. I am the co-founder and CEO at Outclass. We're not as mature and old as Taleemabad. We just launched 2 years ago, actually 1.5 years ago, and we're in the test prep revision market, and we're going on towards professional courses and up the vertical. So we're getting started.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I'll just give a quick introduction about myself. I used to be a strategy consultant at McKinsey. I'm no longer. Around 7-8 months ago, I joined a fintech, actually. So I'm a market launcher at Telda, which is similar to what Mo was speaking about. We are looking at digitizing the economy across the region. We're an Egyptian fintech and looking at Pakistan as our second market. But in a past life, I was obsessed with education. Probably similar to you guys, I used to wake up in the middle of the night thinking like, how many of my customers are going to convert to paying? How do I deliver more value to these customers? How do we get them employed, right? So my first startup was actually in Edtech, where we were basically focused on upskilling adults in the UK, looking at how we get them into more resilient, better paying jobs so that they can stay employed in the longer term. Thank you everybody for the introductions. Like I said, I think we've seen what some of the nuances in the market, right? We're seeing that people are pushing the thinking and the traditional models that we might have seen in other markets. The next question that I have for you guys is, can you speak a little bit about some of the biggest challenges you might be facing today. What is it that could help your organizations get to the next level? Feel free to take your time if you want to think about it.
I can start because there are so many that I can present a list, but I'll just do one or two and then you guys can chip in. I think the first one, as a startup owner, the one that any edtech owner would face, is the sector itself. It's a very slow cook kind of a sector. There needs to be a paradigm shift in the consumer mindset. It's the kind of market where people are so used to free content, they don't actually want to pay. And we've also done a lot of research, actually इनको क्या चाहिए, and they don't find value in paying for videos or online education. So for our market, there's a general perception that this is maybe, you can't touch it, it's not tangible, you just record it once, like why should we be paying for it? It's probably not as effective. So there's a mindset problem or opportunity, I'd rather say, that they're not yet ready to or have an appetite for edtech. And on that note, I just want to add, people think that this was perhaps the best time for edtechs to launch because of COVID and everybody shifted to online learning, but actually it was very, very counterproductive. Because what happened was, once nobody was prepared for it, there was no edtech on the horizon. And what happened was all the schools, all the tuition academies, everyone just hopped online, came onto Zoom, and that was their version of edtech. So to them, a Zoom background and a kulfi wala going in the background, and like, all of that was edtech suddenly, and parents, and nobody was ready for it. And it was a horrible experience, if I'm being honest, for students, for teachers. My mother is a teacher, she couldn't handle Zoom and Google Classrooms, but what the result was, nobody really now believes in edtech, or I wouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people have these preconceived notions now that, okay, no, edtech is Zoom. So I think my biggest challenge perhaps is to first move them away from that preconceived notion that, listen guys, that wasn't really edtech. There is a lot of power in edtech, a lot of things that brick and mortar chalk and talk classrooms really can't offer, but that's going to take time and marketing and money and all of that. So I think for me that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you for that.
I think I agree with that. I think that there is definitely a market which isn't quite ready. We've now been in that end. We developed content, made an app, put it to about 1.5 million users, thought they would pay, but wouldn't. But did that mean that they were not watching the content? They were consuming the content like crazy. During COVID, each session was about 20 minutes. Kids were coming back for multiple sessions. And so about 2 years ago, Taleemabad gave up on the idea of trying to monetize content. And I want to talk about why that decision was taken. But our content then went up live on TV, on radio, as well as multiple other platforms. It became the catching net that would rope in about 10 million people, tell them about Taleemabad. But then we asked our users, in fact, within the education ecosystem, where are you willing to pay? And there was only one answer, schools. And we asked them how much they were willing to pay. And for the bulk of the Pakistani market, it's about 1,000 rupees, 1,000 or 1,500 rupees. And so what we started to do then is, which has been our most successful sort of way of monetizing this huge mass of users, is that we found out that Pakistan has, in fact, one of the biggest private school markets in the world. About 200,000 schools, most of them charging less than $3, $4 a month, but most of them also struggling because they don't have enough students and they can't meet the expenses. A teacher gets paid 3,000 rupees in one of these schools per month. That is less than blue-collar workers in the city. And so what we did with these schools was we said to them, hey, you're going to use this platform, you're going to use this content, we're going to bring a ton of parents to you, and from the ton of parents that you get, which is of course a business gain, you're going to give us a cut. So what happened, instead of trying to monetize our content, was the content was a catch, but then we drove people to schools. When they got to our schools, we monetized them over there. So I think monetization is the biggest challenge. Let me give you an example of what Aiman is also talking about. Even if they were willing to pay, there was no option to pay. One of our users traveled from quote Addu to another sheher just to go to an Easy Paisa shop so that he could do the transaction and pay for the service. Ek point pe Talimabad, we had scratch cards like Jazz or Uphone does. And those, if a user was willing to pay, then a TCS rider would pick up the scratch card, take it to the post office nearest to this user who would be most often in a village. The person would come there, pick up the scratch card, take the scratch card home, scratch the scratch card, enter the date. Compare that to something like the UPI in India. I think this is also another big challenge. Even if people are willing to pay, there are humongous challenges to getting them to make a transaction. So I think this is one big challenge. And I think we often compare ourselves to India. India eliminated the out-of-school children problem a long time ago. Back in 2004, they had been one of the fastest drivers of removing the out-of-school children population. Now, most of our kids, 22.5 million, aren't in school. Those that go to K-5 schools, 50% don't learn even how to read and write. Unless we fix those problems, there can't be a Byju's in Pakistan or like a huge presence in Pakistan, because these kids grow up and ultimately the parents are not willing to invest in education because the promise has been broken for them. Nothing has come out of it.
You've skipped through like 4 of my questions, but no, that was very insightful. And I think what we're hearing is that on one level, I think we all hear about the monetization challenges, but even when you can monetize, it seems like I can imagine that the cost of accepting that payment must be super high if there's all this physical transaction there as well. Navera, would you like to?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I have a slightly different opinion
Please.
than both Haroon and Aiman.
Yep.
The biggest challenge for us had been getting payment from the schools. See, we live in this part of the world where parents, they do believe that if they invest on the education of their children, they will make a career and they'll eventually become something. So after food and shelter, the third thing that they invest on would be education. So if they do see quality, they would invest. So the problem is not with parents. So ever since we shifted to B2C, this problem of getting money from the parents was not the problem. They see the quality, they see that their children are gaining something, some values coming out of it, and they would love to pay. The problem here is with schools. If you want to hit the masses, you want to work with government schools, you want to work with these private schools. Haroon and I we were talking that these small schools like Sana School or Abdullah School or these schools which are opened in your neighborhood and all, you want to incentivize those schools. You want to do something with those institutes, and they're not willing to do that. There could be something from the government which would help, maybe some sort of policies, some things making mandatory for these schools maybe. But I think that's where the problem lies, not really with the parents, but with the schools, with the institutes which are imparting education.
And would you say that there's a lack of interest in engaging with sort of more digital entities? There's a lack of understanding of the value that would be?
Maybe lack of understanding, that's what I would say. Because see, the education has been the same. I studied in the same way, probably you studied the same way, our parents studied the same way. There has not been any technical innovation in that particular domain. Maximum the schools have done is like put an LCD and they're like, we've done all with the technology and innovation. That's about it. But when you go and talk to them, they do understand the value of it, but they're too scared to implement it. I'm not sure where the problem is, but we really need to resolve this part of the world.
It's interesting. And I think maybe Haroon has a perspective actually on, Ghazi.
Yeah, so
At this point.
I think जो आप लोग में बातें की exactly 100% agreed. Just to top up, so financial हमने challenges के बारे में बात की. I would talk about the attitude that people have towards education, specifically the masses. एक जो learning की तरफ एक जो attitude है generally हमारी population का, and education coming at the back burner. So,
sorry guys.
सही. So learning की तरफ जो attitude है, especially of the masses, it is something that जो consumer behavior है towards education, it's something that needs a radical shift. क्योंकि अभी भी हमारी आवाम का जो मकसद है कि जी तालीम जो भी करके इंग्लिश पढ़नी आ जाए, और एजुकेशन की जो डेफिनेशन है उसको रेडिकली शिफ्ट करने की ज़रूरत है। उसकी वजह से ही वही जो मोनेटाइजेशन चैलेंजेस है कि जी इसके ऊपर पैसे क्यों खर्च करें या इसके लिए हम पैसे क्यों दें, ये तो उन्हें बस वीडियो दिखा दी है, इसका क्या मकसद है। सो वो दैट माइंडसेट टुवर्ड्स एजुकेशन एंड एजुकेशन कमिंग एट द बैक बर्नर, फॉलोइंग इन द बैक बर्नर बिकॉज देयर इज सो मेनी अदर चैलेंजेस एज वी वर टॉकिंग कि जी एजुकेशन को वो स्पेस ही नहीं मिलती। पहले ये चैलेंजेस अपने XYZ हेल्थ केयर से लेके पॉलिटिकल से लेके इकोनॉमिक से लेके उनको सॉल्व करें तो फिर एजुकेशन के ऊपर आएगा। तो दैट्स ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द फैक्टर्स, दैट्स अ मैसिव कंट्रीब्यूटिंग फैक्टर टुवर्ड्स हाउ वी आर सीइंग विद इन आवर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की टीचर ट्रेनिंग के ऊपर schools के overall monetization challenges etc. are completely kind of falling in the backlog.
I want to quickly jump in and I think bring the voice of those who are willing to serve into the room. And a lot of this is going to be in Urdu, but in the early stages when we were building Talimabad, most of our user base used to be rural. And so in order to do some more research with these people, we used to go farming with these families. अभी राजनपुर के अंदर 40 डिग्री टेम्परेचर के अंदर हम लोग गंदम की काश्तकारी कर रहे होते थे ये डिस्कवर करने के लिए कि हमारा यूज़र स्कूल क्यों नहीं जाता। एंड वहाँ पे आई थिंक एंड दिस इज समथिंग इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर अस हेयर इन इस्लामाबाद एट रमादा टू रियलाइज। बट एक किसान वहाँ पे था हु टोल्ड दिस स्टोरी। मेरे 2 बच्चे थे, आई हैड 2 kids. One of them helped me in the fields and one of them went to school, जो महल्ले का गवर्नमेंट स्कूल था। जो गवर्नमेंट स्कूल गया वो माशाल्लाह 5 जमातें भी पास कर गया। ही सेड वी हैड अ ह्यूज सेलिब्रेशन एंड देन वो प्राइवेट स्कूल जाना शुरू हो गया। प्राइवेट स्कूल जाके उसने मैट्रिक कंप्लीट कर लिया। अब ये ज़िला राजनपुर के अंदर से बच्चा आ रहा है, उसने मैट्रिक भी कर लिया, FSC भी कर ली। फिर उसके बाद वो लड़का उधर कोई लोकल कॉलेज था, सुपीरियर कॉलेज या कोई और कॉलेज, उधर से उसने डिग्री भी कर ली और वो नौकरी के लिए फाइनली 12 साल 13 साल बाद उस बाप का मोमेंट आ गया था कि मेरे एक बच्चे पे मैंने इतने पैसे लगाए हैं। ही यूज्ड टू कम बैक एंड टेल मी वो थोड़ा सा मर्द नहीं लगता, वो बहुत पतला सा हो गया, उसको एनके लग गई है, पता नहीं क्या हो रहा है उसको। बट फाइनली द मोमेंट इट अराइव्ड व्हेन दिस किड वुड बेयर फ्रूट सो टू स्पीक फॉर द पेरेंट। और वो इस्लामाबाद भी गया, लाहौर भी गया, रावलपिंडी भी गया, कराची भी गया, कहीं नौकरी नहीं मिली उसको। एंड बाय द टाइम ही केम बैक एंड दिस इज अबाउट 3 years that this farmer is telling me this story, वो लड़का वापस आया and he was neither capable of working in the field like the other son was, वो तो 12 साल उसने fields में ही काम किया, nor was he an afsar like he wanted him to be, and he was stuck in no man's land in the middle. And so I think the farmer did realize कि education के अंदर value थी. I think we failed him. Because the education system, राजनपुर से मैट्रिक किए हुए एक लड़के को कहीं नौकरी शायद कराची में मुश्किल मिलनी थी। सो आई थिंक दैट एंड ऑफ द स्पेक्ट्रम आल्सो नीड्स टू बी फुलफिल्ड बिकॉज फिर वो लड़का वापस जाके सबको बताता है कोई ज़रूरत नहीं स्कूल जाने की, गो एंड सिट एंड खेतों में काम करें, ज़मीन मैनेज करें, तालीम से कोई फ़ायदा नहीं होगा। सो दे आर प्रीटी रैशनल आई वुड से अबाउट एजुकेशन के आउटकम्स एज वेल।
It's a very interesting point, right? And I think it encapsulates one of the biggest challenges, right? What is value for the whether you want to call it the customer, the consumer, it's actually so complicated, right? Because the education might be being received by a student who's in, I don't know, grade 8, for example. The person who's paying for that education might be the parent, it might be the school, it might be the government, right? So we have this equation which is multivariate, we have different people with different incentives, right? And I think from my perspective, I think one of the core things we need to do is identify which stakeholder we're serving and really understand how do we deliver value for them. In the story that you just mentioned, I mean, now the solution starts to become a little bit clearer, right? In this specific scenario, it's a question of how do we get the person who's gone through the 12 years of education into a job that actually shows value to the family, right? It's not simply are they watching the video that they should have been watching, are they getting the good grades, but it's actually so much later down the life cycle. And this, I think, is one of the exciting things about education is because of how complicated the problem is, it also fosters better collaboration, right? I'm hoping that from this panel, I'm sure many of you already knew each other, but I'm hoping from this panel even that afterwards you guys can think about a little bit about how collaboration might look in the space. One enabler that we've seen, especially in fintech in Pakistan, is the role the government has played, or regulators, right? So what I want to put forward to you guys is, if you had it, and once again, I know that it's different, it's regulated both federally and locally and maybe nationally as well. If you guys had requests for the, for the government, what would we be looking for? How can we enable Edtech in whichever form we're looking at it through government policies?
So I think it would be like in 2 phases probably. First is train the teachers. That's really important. You can't do anything if the teacher is not willing to use the technology in the classroom, like you can actually create a Mercedes if the person is not willing to drive it.
Yeah.
It's useless, right? So that's the first part, that train the teachers, train the mindset that Aiman was talking about. That's the mindset that we need to change. I don't know, teachers are a bit scared of technology. So we went to this school once and they just logged into our platform and they were like, we've done enough for today. You have not even taught a single thing. You just logged in and you were like, we're done. But that's something that we need to change. So after that, in the US, maybe a bad example to quote because the dynamics don't meet, but something on the similar lines. So each teacher has like $50 to spend on apps that would help her students in a particular thing. So maybe after changing this mindset of teachers, they incentivize teachers and give them some budget, maybe not teachers, the headmistress or someone, to spend on, on each children's education, on some technology, on some apps, whatever it is, maybe some arts, maybe some paints, whatever. But maybe that could be a change that we all are hoping to see.
Actually, I think one of the really cool things India did, personally, by the way, I hate drawing comparisons because there are different markets, a bigger middle class, everything. But one of the things they did was very early on, I think 2018, the government actually started this initiative. They formed a committee. I don't know, it was short for, I don't know what it stood for, but it was NEAT, I think. And what they did was they would collaborate with public schools and private schools and with Edtechs and form these mini partnerships. And they didn't just give the, what do you call, a take-off for a lot of, for like, bear with me. But they didn't give that one contract to one party. For every different province or every different state, they had, like a mix of Edtechs, all contributing towards, okay, how do we make the classroom a better, more adaptive learning space? In the process, they gave that, like buoyancy to the edtechs that were, there are a lot of edtechs in India, by the way, I think about 4,000 plus. Not all of them got a chance, but at least the ones who were doing considerable work were encouraged to get into these public-private partnerships with schools. Something that other speakers also mentioned, like it's very difficult to get these schools to partner because they, I don't know, maybe they see it as a threat or as a replacement tool, but we're actually, I think most edtechs in Pakistan are actually complementing school learning and trying to fix a huge deficit in education in Pakistan. So we're not actually competing against them. That education for schools or teachers, and then coming up with these mini partnership projects for schools just to be able to incorporate, okay, what does Outclass have to offer to XYZ government school? Or maybe we could partner with, Care Foundation schools. They're doing a great job. They've taken so many schools under their wing. They revamped them. They're teaching them. Maybe, we're developing matriculation content. Maybe the government should have policies which can, make the whole partnership thing more conducive. Nothing of the sort exists right now. We're seen as a threat.
Makes sense.
I also want to jump in here, and I'll ask that question क्योंकि सारे यहाँ पे tech से लोगों का ताल्लुक भी है. Design thinking में सबसे पहला step क्या होता है? जो 5 steps में से सबसे पहला step क्या होता है? Empathy, right? So empathy. So empathizing with the final user, empathizing with who's going to use your product, empathizing with किसके लिए आप चीज़ बना रहे हैं. I think when you talk about the government sector, one of the challenges, and this is one of the many challenges, is that we are failing to empathize with who the product is being developed for. Tech, एक तो Byju's का क्योंकि नाम अभी आ चुका है, and I know it's going to come up in our conversation later on. We are so obsessed with Byju's. It's just कि हमने वही बनाना है यहाँ पे. पाकिस्तान का Byju's कौन बनेगा अगला? There are so many other problems that we need to solve within the tech sector, within the ed sector. कि वो video-based learning, synchronous content versus asynchronous content, etc., are not the only problems. It's not just the only thing to focus on. अभी एक जो challenge मुझे constantly जो नज़र आ रहा है वो ये कि the resistance of adopting technology or the resistance to change by the public sector teachers because they think कि ये जो technology जो ला रहे हैं, this is going to drive us out of work. हम लोग जो हैं इतने सालों से काम कर रहे हैं, we don't want to change. And even if we do change, ये जो नई ये computer आ जाएगा, ये तो हमारी नौकरी ले जाएगा. उसके चक्कर में आपका जो फाइनल जो यूजर है ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, दैट टीचर हु इज गोइंग टू इम्प्लीमेंट दैट टेक्नोलॉजी विद इन द क्लासरूम, आर कॉन्स्टेंटली रेजिस्टिंग टेक्नोलॉजी. एक तो पहले ही पिकअप ही नहीं कर रहे टेक्नोलॉजी, और जो कर भी रहे हैं वो टीचर्स जो हैं आर नॉट विलिंग टू काइंड ऑफ वर्क ऑन दैट फ्रंट. सो आई रियली थिंक कि उनके प्रॉब्लम्स को एक्चुअली आइडेंटिफाई करें. आपको अगर मोटे मोटे कुछ और प्रॉब्लम्स बताएं, उनमें इंग्लिश स्पीकिंग एबिलिटी. सो इंग्लिश, क्योंकि हमें वैसे ही एक तो पोस्ट कॉलोनियल मुल्क हैं, तो हमें वैसे ही बड़ा ऑब्सेशन है कि अंग्रेजी बोलता हो, चाहे मैट्रिक पास होना होगा, अंग्रेजी कितनी उसकी फ्लुएंट. ये एक मैसिव प्रॉब्लम है लो कॉस्ट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स का. उनको ये और कुछ ना कराएं, हमारे जो टीचरों को ना आप इंग्लिश पढ़ाना सिखा दें, उनका ज़रा एक्सेंट बन जाए, हमारा ऑटोमेटिकली जो है ना बच्चे, हमारी इनरोलमेंट बढ़ जाती है, हमारे प्रॉफिट्स ऊपर चले जाते हैं. उसके अलावा स्कूल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सिस्टम्स कि अटेंडेंस मॉनिटरिंग, उनको लीडरशिप को कैसे सपोर्ट हो कि टेक को यूज़ करके अपने CCTV कैमराज and monitoring classrooms through CCTV. I would say that's part of Edtech. कि किस तरीके से monitoring and evaluation can be improved within classrooms by people who are running low-cost private schools. लेकिन क्योंकि हमने बायजूस को देख लिया कि जी किस तरीके से इतनी वो कंपनी बढ़ गई, तो उससे आगे बात बढ़ ही नहीं रही, as opposed to actually finding out what the real problems of local stakeholders on ground are and trying to solve those as opposed to the ones that we want to superimpose on them.
Thank you for that. I think that was a very insightful a response there. I think one of the things that I love about discussions like this, especially when we have people who understand the challenge and the problem so intimately, is we really realize that there's so much nuance, right? Edtech is not who is completing a degree or a certification. It's how is that payment being made? It's how is that course being delivered? It's how is that person getting employed? It's are they attending their classes? Are they getting their resources? There's so much to it. And I think we've heard a lot about some of the challenges. Sorry, Haroon, I didn't let you answer this one. But I would love to hear a little bit about the positive side. As a country of, once again, we're going to hear a lot of times, but 220, 230 million people. Obviously, you know, there's some positives, alhamdulillah. Can we speak a little bit about what we have achieved in the edtech space so far?
I think I'll get started with this, and I think this is probably linked to the other question as well, but I think for the past 5 years, we've been lobbying for the government to get involved in spurring the edtech space on. And I think credit due to them where they did do something. Within COVID, in the first 15 days of COVID, I swear to God, the government operated like a startup. Within 15 days, it got the teleschool channel live on satellite television, live on free-to-air broadcast networks. Second thing, they'd gotten a framework underway to put content on TV. Mm-hmm. And then the pandemic was over, and we thought that would go. But the government had foresight enough to reveal tenders for edtech companies to create new content because the demand hadn't subsided from the people who were watching it on TV. And so right now, also Talimabad has won a contract with the government to develop content that goes on air on PTV, on Allama Iqbal, Open University, and other open standards that the government has. I think credit to the government for doing this. They can certainly continue along this line. I don't think policies should be patchwork. Mm-hmm. And so if this is done consistently, I think that's a great thing. The other great part is that the government did this because when they did a study of teleschool and television programming for kids, they did find that there was an incredible number of people that were tuning in, 8.5 million every week on teleschool, and about 60% or more saying that they really valued the transmission. About 20 to 30% of them from really low income households beneath the $5.5 a day poverty line. Spurring the government on to do new contracts and stuff like this. So I think one of the things that this reveals is that, yes, there's value for content. I don't think people can pay for it quite yet. When we did some profiling with the government, here's a typical user profile that watches on TV and on radio. He's a mazdoor, उसके 6 बच्चे हैं, वो सुबह 6 बच्चों को इतने छोटे से टीवी के सामने ला के रख देता है कि वो टेलीविजन प्रोग्रामिंग वहाँ पे देख लें. वो चाहे कुछ भी हो जाए वो पे नहीं कर पाएगा. That's a sort of one of the profiles of the people that call in and use this programming. So I think एक अच्छी चीज़ ये हुई है कि content की value और efficacy at least develop हो गई है. That's the first rule of the game. And then you build complementary tech on top of it, mobile platforms and apps and all of that. बहुत ज़्यादा लोग तालीमाबाद की टीवी ब्रॉडकास्ट देख के फिर उसकी ऐप के ऊपर आते हैं. टीवी ब्रॉडकास्ट पे 8.5 मिलियन है तो ऐप पे 1.5 मिलियन है. कम है, लेकिन it's still I think the value for the content is very clear. कुछ दिनों में जब इंटरनेट डाउन हो जाता है पाकिस्तान में, जैसा कल हुआ था, तो हमारे यूजर्स की भी चीखें उठती हैं फिर. ये अच्छी बात है क्योंकि उनको वैल्यू नज़र आ रही है उस कंटेंट के अंदर.
Makes sense. Anyone else want to highlight some of the successes that we've had? Maybe a more positive perspective on how we're doing as a country in the education space?
It's not really the positives or that, but you know what you get out of this.
Please.
It's satisfaction, you know. It's not money. It's not anything else. It's the satisfaction. So once you realize that you have actually added some value in any child's life, that's beyond money. That's beyond anything. So you're talking about these are jobs which are not being created yet. How do you train? How do you educate for those? You can't, right? But you can sort of, teach the skills which are important, which would help them moving forward. And when you understand that you are giving that value in even a single child's life, that's enough. That's enough to make you sleep at night.
No, I think I agree completely with you. I want to add here, we've not been around long enough to actually claim that we've changed so many lives, but one thing that we started this, my co-founders and I, because it offers the kind of scale that we used to read in textbooks. कि जी tech के साथ बड़ा scale आता है, and it became a mantra of sorts, tech and scale. We realized this when we had our first partnership with the school in Quetta. It was a school of, I think, 35 children, and it was still grade 8. And the school principal who was actually a supply chain guy, so he wasn't really an educationist. He called us up and he said, listen, हमने सुना है आपके बारे में, हमने metric नहीं, हमने O levels करना है, तो आप हमें अपना content दें, and let's try it out. We neither have the teachers nor the money nor the students right now, but we want to offer it, and our schools and our whole city doesn't have access to the kind of teachers that you have on your platform and who've already recorded really great stuff. And to us that was the proof point that we were looking for, that you mentioned, the satisfaction that, okay, yes, we've made really high quality content. All we have to do now is give them that access that, okay, you can even project it in a classroom, get your students, we can train your teachers. Again, teacher training is a component of it. They need to learn how to teach using, Edtech. But at least it's possible now. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. They would just go for, whatever is available in that area. So the possibilities that come with Edtech, if it's done right, if it's done with the kind of quality and love that we're putting in, it can do wonders. I don't think there's any other solution. Brick and mortar can't possibly fill that deficit in Pakistan's education landscape.
Similar points? Sorry. I think maybe we can open up to some questions from the audience. Okay, we've got a very keen hand straight away. Do we have the... Can we do this? Sorry, I didn't ask permission. Yeah, we can do this. Okay, so we'll go for first. I think you need to wait a minute for the mic, but... I'll just repeat what he says.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Ali from Data Pilot. Firstly, hats off to you guys for working towards EdTech. This is great. But I just want to point out that, just like Ghazi mentioned, and I'd like to agree with what you said, because there's so much untapped within the EdTech space. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I run a data company, and I work with an EdTech firm based out of the US. And the scale of using data to take decisions within that company is massive. They have extensive data ecosystem. So what I've noticed specifically within companies in Pakistan and EdTech, I'd like to understand how, for instance, Haroon, yourself and you guys, how are you guys using data to make that quantitative analysis about students? For example, if I'm using Taleemabad for my daughter, there should be a feedback loop which answers, which asks questions from me to create, to build quantitative analysis as to where my daughter was and where is she. Similarly, in schools, we don't have like data-driven decision making incorporated when it comes to analyzing student performance. It's usually, parents, teachers telling parents that your students are not performing.
Yeah.
How do we collect the right quantitative data points to make this data-driven? And I think that's where I feel we have this missing big time, and I'd like to hear
Thanks so much. So how can we use data to take EdTech to the next level?
I think there's tons and tons of data. I have to agree with that, but I think it's untrue that it's not being data driven. I'll give you an example. When you land on the Taleemabad platform, for example, each action is being tracked. 1.5 million kids dropping into the app. वो किस पॉइंट पे किस वीडियो को देख रहे हैं, कितने सेकंड के बाद छोड़ के जा रहे हैं, कितने सेकंड के बाद बच्चों का ज़्यादा ड्रॉप ऑफ आया, एक तो वो सारा पॉइंट स्टोर हो रहा है. एंड आई विश आई कुड शो दैट टू यू. एक पूरा बिजनेस इंटेलिजेंस यूनिट एट तालीमाबाद दैट इन्फॉर्म्स देन कि आपने जो पहले 2 मिनट के अंदर बच्चे को हुक करने के लिए कंटेंट पीस रखा था ना, वो हुक काम कर गया, लेकिन जैसे ही आपने उसको टीच करने की कोशिश की थी तो इतने % बच्चे उस 1.5 मिलियन में से ड्रॉप ऑफ करना शुरू हो गए. बट आफ्टर दैट इज ऑल्सो असेसमेंट्स. वो असेसमेंट्स पूरी की पूरी ब्लूम्स टैक्सोनॉमी पे डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हुई नहीं है, और इजी, मीडियम, हार्ड, सुपर हार्ड, और ना सिर्फ बच्चा कितने सवाल सही कर रहा है, कितने सवाल गलत कर रहा है, किस सवाल पे ज़्यादा टाइम लगा रहा है, किस जगह से वो बिलोंग करता है, किस ग्रेड में वो है, कितनी स्टंटिंग हुई हुई है उसकी लर्निंग लेवल में. वन थिंग दैट वीव लर्नड ऑपरेटिंग फ्रॉम दिस डेटाबेस इज कि पाकिस्तान में कभी भी कोई बच्चा ग्रेड लेवल में नहीं होता, और पूरी दुनिया में भी नहीं होता. अगर आप ग्रेड 3 में है तो आपकी अंग्रेजी शायद ग्रेड 4 की है, आपकी साइंस शायद ग्रेड 2 की है, आपकी मैथ्स शायद ग्रेड 6 की हुई हुई है, क्योंकि आपको मैथ्स में ज़्यादा शौक है. So I think that allows us to form like a complete picture of a child, but more importantly on the macro level, I think it allows us to look at the reason why Taleemabad programming has been so successful on TV is because inch by inch, literally second by second, it gets analyzed. Right down to एक point पे हमने Netflix की तरह अपने सारे content के अंदर music इस्तेमाल जो हुए, रंग जो इस्तेमाल हुए, character जो इस्तेमाल हुए, उसको tag किया था और फिर analyze किया था कि जब कौन सा character आता है, कौन सा music लगता है, कौन सी sound लगती है, तो बच्चा ज़्यादा hooked रहता है और उसके बाद सवाल भी ज़्यादातर ठीक करता है. So I think it's one, एक केस मैंने डिसलेक्सिया बच्चे का प्रेडिक्ट किया था, क्योंकि वो सवाल वो जब भी ट्रेसिंग कर रहा था हमारी ऐप के अंदर वो सही नहीं कर रहा था. एंड सो इंटरेस्टिंग टू सी दैट देयर आर फर्दर implications of this and algorithms that you can use, but I think everybody is looking at data to quite an extent, I would say.
So we have created these small interactive games on every science topic. So for example, if you're teaching seasons, right? Season happens because our Earth is tilted at 23 degrees angle. So the child gets to rotate the Earth, so bring it on 0 and then see what's going to happen. And then play the whole game, right? And learn the concept while playing. And our system, our software, it collects these data points. And then the whole reports are being generated that, कहाँ पे मसला था, क्या उसने ठीक किया, क्या उसने गलत किया, कहाँ पे वो फंस गया था. Was that child able to solve the whole quiz or the game? Did he lose? How many times did he or she lose? So all of this is then conveyed to parents in a proper format, and then we tell them that your child lacks on these skills, or the child is exceptional on maths or some science topics or something like that. So we help them identify the passion of the child at a very young age, so they have the right data, as you mentioned, to make the decision.
इसमें थोड़ा सा एक चीज़ बस ऐड करूँगा. Again, from an EdTech perspective, I think yes, data is being used a lot. Talking about the schools itself, so मेरी दुखती रग अभी यही है. Working at the Lum School of Education, we've been trying to introduce data programs, so अपने educators को data use करना सिखा दें कि किस तरीके से करते हैं. Schools की generally private schools की अगर बात करें, government की तो बात ही नहीं कर रहे. Government में जो data use हो रहा है वो अभी तो infrastructure नहीं है वो data collect करने का, never mind actually being able to evaluate and interpret it. प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में, हाई कॉस्ट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स, बिसाइड्स अ फ्यू, कौन होते हैं, प्रिंसिपल्स कौन होते हैं हाई कॉस्ट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स के? जनरली कुछ फॉरेनर्स होते हैं या फिर इट्स अ वुमेन डोमिनेटेड स्पेस जनरली, जहाँ पे जो औरतें होंगी अबव अबाउट 45 से 50 वाली एज के ऊपर कोई एक प्रिंसिपल होंगी और उसके नीचे फिर हु ओन द स्कूल, इस तरह करके. अभी आपको अगर उनको डेटा यूज नहीं करना आ रहा, अगर उनको समझ ही नहीं आ रही डेटा की किस तरीके से, और इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड डेटा, और आप उनके लिए नहीं, वही अगेन एम्पैथी वाली बात आ गई, इफ यू नॉट एम्पैथाइजिंग विद देम एंड यू नॉट डेवलपिंग इंटरवेंशंस दैट आर अंडरस्टैंडेबल फॉर द फाइनल यूजर हु डज नॉट हैव अ बैकग्राउंड इन डेटा. हम लोगों को तो शायद डेटा इंटरप्रेट करना वगैरह आता हो, लेकिन अगर उस एज ग्रुप के लोगों को स्पेसिफिकली अगर उनको डेटा इंटरप्रेट करना नहीं आ रहा, अगर उनको डेटा यूज़ करना नहीं आ रहा, उनको इम्प्लीमेंट करना नहीं आ रहा, तो वो फिर किस तरीके से यूज़ करेंगे. सो देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ स्पेस for people who can actually empathize with the final user and make it easy enough ऐसी interventions बना लें जो कि final user को आसानी से समझ आ जाए और वो फिर डेटा यूज़ कर सके, as opposed to हम जो complicated interventions जो आई हैं that don't float with the kind of people who are currently working in the education space, which includes the school principals, which includes the school teachers as well.
मुझे आपकी बात समझ नहीं है, डेटा एनालिस्ट रख लें स्कूल में, क्या प्रिंसिपल ने खुद थोड़ी करना really valid point जी. हमारे लिए this is all the more relevant because we are a test prep, we work in the test prep area, तो उसमें तो आपको पता है it's all about getting that score and so अभी हमने O level से start किया है and I'll be very honest, in the during our launch we didn't have adaptive learning and आपका ये जो data analytics because it costs money and we were starting with our own founders pool of capital. But the first thing that we're going to do now that we've secured funding is that we're going to work on basic क्या आपके learning algorithm से लेकर before and after जी. So no rocket science. आप पहले student को एक test करवाएं just to gauge where that student stands, and then you go through your lessons and then there are intermittent tests and quizzes in the middle. So that's something that we're thinking on lines of. It's not as simple as it sounds. I agree with Ghazi, मैं सिर्फ उनको तंग करी थी, but it takes money and it takes brains and we're trying to simplify that process, but because it's really crucial. Otherwise आप कैसे हिसाब लगा सकते हो, तो एग्जाम के बाद आपको पता लगेगा कि ये successful था कि नहीं. And we want to make that journey easier for parents and students, so we're working on that. It's very important. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Usama Zahir from Bahawalpur. मेरा ये क्वेश्चन है, आई हैव बेसिकली टू क्वेश्चंस. द फर्स्ट वन इज़ दैट कि एडटेक में स्टार्टअप्स जो आ रहे हैं नए, वो इमर्ज तो इसी नीयत से करते हैं कि हम कम्प्लीमेंट करेंगे स्कूलिंग सिस्टम को, बट दे एंडेड अप लाइक मोर ऑफ द एकेडमी सिस्टम. मतलब कि ये आप इतना पे कर दें हमें और हम जो है आपको एकेडमी की सर्विसेज दे देंगे. हम ये क्यों नहीं करते कि अगर स्कूल सिस्टम बुरा है तो हम उसके साथ compete करें या कुछ ऐसा कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर का चेंज लाएं कि वो इस चीज़ को अडेप्ट करें और हम इससे बेटर एजुकेशन की तरफ जा सकें.
Guys, can you have one very quick answer, please? Sorry, we're running a little bit out of time.
Sorry, can I answer this? मेरे दिल के बहुत करीब है academy versus schools. आप can I? So आपका question is very relevant जी. दो तीन बातें हैं. Firstly, we can't any edtech is currently not in a situation or position to completely be an alternative to schooling, क्योंकि academics is only one part of the school experience and no edtech right now that I know of personally can give you an alternative for sports, for extracurriculars, for human interaction, for school friendships, for all of that. So वो एक पहला तो हम apple to apple comparison कर नहीं सकते हैं. दूसरा, I think most edtechs are still charging a lot less than these academies जो आपको every year they're churning out students because एक उनकी reputation बनी हुई है कि अगर आप इस academy में जाएंगे तो आपके number आ जाएंगे और वगैरह वगैरह. And so based on that reputation they're charging a lot. What edtechs are trying to do is they're trying to disrupt that mindset कि जी ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप academy ही जाएंगे तो आप कहेंगे there are better ways of doing the same thing and we're going to provide that for you, 1/4 the cost or 1/3 the cost. And I don't think कि इसके अलावा कोई और तरीका है because free, I am not supportive of free education, especially after school prep. एक तो हमारे मुल्क में जी free की कोई कदर नहीं करता. Personally, this is based on my personal experience. The other is जी startup costs होती हैं and any company needs some revenue. You don't want to rely on grants or anything, foreign funding just to be able to sustain it. So in order to develop quality content, you need to charge them something. But as long as you're not ripping them off or trying to use them, that's what I think, and trying to exploit them, I think it's fair play. But no, we can't replace schools entirely. That's Ghazi, as a school
Thank you, Aiman. I think one
Sorry,
thing,
मैंने ज़्यादा बोल दिया.
नहीं आपकी fault नहीं, मेरी fault है, मैं time नहीं सही देख रहा था. I'm very sorry, we are running out of time, guys. But thank you so much for that, Aiman. I think one thing that we can all appreciate is EdTech, like many other industries that we've seen, is much more complicated than just Zoom, pretty much, right? There's so much more to unpack. So thank you so much to the panelists.